Hey everyone. Sincere apologies if I look a little sweaty in this video, or if I look a little bit like I want to die at some points, because it is super fucking hot here right now and my aircon is broken, so what are you gonna do? So I've had this idea for a video for a pretty long time now, and the only thing that was actually stopping me from making it was that my last video was unscripted, so it literally took like 20 minutes to film. But this one was going to require an actual script that I was gonna have to actually write, and I don't know if you guys know this, but writing is hard. But yes, I did write it eventually because I think that this is something that's pretty important to talk about, especially now. Actually, it's been important to talk about ever since competitive gaming became a thing, but I wasn't around back then, so I'm only doing it now. So we're here to answer a question that people have been asking for years and years. If you've ever been plagued by this question, don't worry. I'm here to answer it definitively, once and for all, right here, right now. Why are women bad at video games? Well, they're not. Women are not bad at video games. There is nothing that makes them inherently worse at video games than anyone else. And thinking that, it makes you stupid. Alright. Thanks so much, guys. Yes. Thanks for listening. Yeah, I'll be back next time. Alright. Okay, fine, I'll explain. Now, when I wade through the messy topic of women being worse at video games, it's important to note that I'm talking about competitive online games where you play with or against other people. Games like League of Legends, or Apex Legends, or I guess Farming Legends, apparently. Defining competitive gaming is important because it's a genre of games that people just normally don't associate with women or girls. I remember when I was growing up, a lot of my friends would play Call of Duty or League of Legends on a regular basis. Meanwhile, I didn't play a competitive game until 2016 when Overwatch came out because I just didn't think that they were for me or that it was something that I was supposed to be interested in. I mean, I knew some girls who played League of Legends, but none of them played it as seriously as the boys did. This is not to say that women haven't been playing competitive games. Women have always been playing competitive games, in fact. Yes, Bonnie, say the word competitive more, why don't you? But earlier on, there was definitely not as many of them, and they definitely didn't feel as comfortable being vocal about it. So why are women such a minority in competitive gaming? Well, for that, we have to go back to our first distinction. Let's look at an example of a game for women. The Sims is sort of what most people think of as a girly game. I think this is because there's no fighting and no rankings, and it's pretty much all just about customization. I mean, everyone knows that customizing things is a girl thing. That's probably why there are so many websites called, like, girly games for girls that are pretty much all dress-up games. And I'm not knocking dress-up games, I think they're really fun. But I also think that they're kind of emblematic of the kind of game that women have historically been boxed into. On the other side of this, we have the gritty, competitive games, the epic games about fighting, the games for men. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that most boys are not encouraged to play dress-up games. Usually, they're discouraged from it by other boys. Boys definitely start playing competitive online games at a lot younger of an age than their female counterparts, because those games are pretty much built to serve their masculinity. Games like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike are monochrome shooters steeped in machismo featuring grisly men who, I don't know, go to war and fight terrorists, I guess? I honestly don't know because while I was looking up gameplay footage, it was all such a boring brown blur that I didn't even want to look further into it. Which sort of proves my larger point that women are turned off by these games because they're built entirely to appeal to a specific sense of masculinity. It has to be gritty, and the setting has to be war, and all the characters have to be men, because how else would you prove your worth as a man other than by role-playing as American Sniper from the movie American Sniper? Even competitive games that are a bit more colorful and aren't about traditional war, like League of Legends, suffer from the fact that they're clearly made with men in mind. League of Legends has a lot of female characters and always has had female characters, but a lot of them are very sexualized, and honestly, it's really hard to tell the difference between them because they all have the same fucking face and body. On the other hand, League of Legends has a lot of male characters that have incredibly diverse designs, and they're allowed to be different and stand out. The game has been making bigger strides towards inclusivity recently, which is nice to see, but historically League of Legends has always just been seen as kind of a boys' club, and in fact continues to be seen that way by a lot of people. So we have girly games where you make cute characters and make nice houses to put those characters in. And then we have manly games where you shoot things and kill things and rank up because you shot and killed things better than everyone else. Not that every game falls into that same gender binary. Games like Portal 2 or Minecraft don't really have those specific gendered associations because they're based around story or exploration rather than combat or customization. Honestly, this is a pretty complicated topic as to which games are for who. I could probably go more into that, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just simplifying it as much as possible. Let's be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with The Sims. I really like The Sims. I have a paid subscription to The Sims resource. The problem is the way people talk about girly games, as though they're somehow lesser because they don't involve combat and they don't require any skill to be good at them. Competitive games, on the other hand, are a masculine pursuit because they involve fighting and killing, which are things that men do. So they're usually designed with men in mind. Side note, this really makes me respect all the women who have managed to stick with these games, even though they're told at every turn that they're not for them. I definitely couldn't have done that. So we've got a pretty clear-cut divide going on here. Competitive games are for boys, and girls get to play with everything else. This was my internalized idea of games while I was growing up. I just accepted that competitive online games weren't for me, so I had no interest in trying to get into them. And this is where Overwatch comes in. As I mentioned earlier, Overwatch was the first competitive game that I ever played in 2016. When my friend showed me some of the game's cinematics, I was immediately hooked by the bright, colorful environments, the diverse character designs, and the fact that the game actually seemed to have a story. It was like no other shooter I'd ever seen before, so I decided to download it and give it a try. And, I sucked. I'm not being, like, self-deprecating or anything, I was legitimately very bad at the game, but that's, like, understandable, because I'd never played a game like that before. I remember when I first entered the practice range, the first character that I picked was Pharah, and I was immediately so overwhelmed by all the things that I had to think about all at the same time. Wait, so you're telling me I have to walk around, shoot rockets at things, boost into the air, control my jetpack fuel, shoot things while I'm hovering, knock people back. That's too much, man. Obviously, my male friends, who'd been playing shooters since they were 12, fared a lot better than I did. And that's also understandable because they knew the genre better than me, and they actually understood how games worked, which is a fundamental understanding that I didn't have. And I think a lot of girls and women were in my same position when Overwatch came out, but we all wanted to give it a try. And it wasn't just because of the way the game looked, it was also because of the gameplay. Those of you who've played Overwatch probably know the deal with Mercy. For those of you who haven't, Mercy is a support character whose abilities are to fly to her teammates, to alternate heals or damage boost by holding left or right click, and to resurrect her teammates on a long cooldown. When they were just starting out, a lot of women, me included, played Mercy because her kit relies a lot more on game sense rather than raw mechanics, which we didn't have. But at least we could learn the game this way. And it was fine for a while, until people ruined it. Mercy started to be seen as this no-skill character that girls played because they couldn't aim. Now, as a woman who's played a fair bit of Mercy, I would just like to refute that real quick. Mercy might not require the same raw mechanics as a character like McCree or Soldier 76, but she definitely takes skill to play, even if it's not the kind that's traditionally valued in a shooter. And a lot of women out there have made it to high ranks playing Mercy, but their accomplishments are always diminished by the fact that Mercy is seen as an easy character for girls, rather than a character that actually requires skill. Also, a lot of women started playing Mercy because that was the easiest and most accessible way for them to learn how to navigate a first-person shooter for the first time. And when they actually got a grasp on that, they branched out to other different characters. Like me, for example. Also, and this is maybe the most important point, Mercy is fun. that's my scorchingly hot take. Yes, I think Mercy is a fun character to play, and you cannot convince me otherwise. So you might be wondering, how do Mercy and Overwatch relate to this larger point of women in competitive gaming? To which I say, good point. I also almost forgot that that was the main point of the video, so let's go back to that. I think that Mercy players in Overwatch, specifically women playing Mercy, are reflective of a larger problem with women in competitive gaming, namely that most of us are relatively new to it. I've been playing competitive games for as long as Overwatch has been out now, so about 5 years, and that might seem like kind of a long time, but most of my male peers have been playing games for over double that length of time. I'm gonna draw from a personal example here. I play a lot of Apex Legends, often with a bunch of my male friends from high school. So just for clarity's sake, all of us usually rank at around Platinum and Diamond. And I can hang with them just fine. I think that my game sense and my usage of abilities is pretty good, basically on par with theirs or sometimes even better. But something that usually comes up is that their mechanics are just better than mine. Because they've been playing shooters since they were like 11 or 12 years old, whereas I started several years later with Overwatch. Their aim is just better. And I'm okay with that because my aim isn't bad by any means, but sometimes it does make me wonder how much better I might be if I'd also had 5 or 6 extra years to learn it. I don't mean this as like a brag or anything, I'm just realistic about my own abilities, and I think I'm pretty alright at games, so. It also makes me wonder how many women out there might have had the potential to be really good at competitive games, like among the best even, but because they were always discouraged from or disinterested in participating in those games because they didn't seem to be for them, they didn't start until later in life, when all their male peers already had a leg up on them because they were way more experienced, and for those women, grinding it out to make up the difference just didn't seem worth it. I do also want to mention that when I first started playing Overwatch, I played versus bots for 2 weeks before my brother got annoyed at me and finally forced me into a quick play match. This is because I was petrified of playing with other people, and this actually is another topic that I want to talk about. The online aspect of online gaming. Let's say that I'd played, I don't know, Borderlands or some other single-player shooter before I ever picked up Overwatch. By the time I got into Overwatch, I would have understood the basics of first-person movement, how to use abilities, and the fundamentals of gunplay. But playing online with and against other people would still be something completely new to me. And although it's weird to think about now, when you're new to it, it is pretty daunting. I just remember being really afraid that I was going to mess up and then get flamed by my teammates and also get made fun of by the enemy team. It's an environment that definitely takes a while to adjust to, and it goes without saying that that environment is one that's especially hostile to women. But I'm gonna say it anyway, because there are some idiots out there who don't believe that that's true. If they make their identities known in a game, women are especially vulnerable to being harassed. Sometimes it's people who are mad that there's a woman on their team. Sometimes it's getting hit on by creeps, and sometimes it's just good old-fashioned misogyny. So, it's really like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. Games like Overwatch, Apex, and Rainbow Six Siege all have voice chat functionality for ease of communication, but being a woman playing those games means being afraid to speak in voice chat because you don't know what's gonna happen if you do. And those voice chats can often get very unsafe for women. So sometimes women just feel forced to disadvantage themselves by not communicating with their team because they're afraid of being harassed, and that's just silly. A lot of women actually end up dropping competitive games because they just don't find it worth it to have to wade through all that harassment to actually get better at the game. And yes, sure, online games are rife with toxicity and insults, no matter who you are, but it can't be understated how hurtful it is when you get insulted based on something about you that you just can't control. It's one thing to flame your teammate for making a misplay. It's an entirely different one to flame them for literally just being who they are. I mean, let's go back to my Mercy example that I mentioned earlier. Women in Overwatch can get flamed for just picking Mercy because of her reputation as a no-skill girl character. Meanwhile, I've literally never heard any male Mercy player get flamed for the same thing. Women shouldn't have to download voice modifiers or change their usernames into something more gender neutral, or play high-skill characters just to have a decent game experience. That should be the baseline. One of the last things I'll say is that being a woman in games is an incredibly contradictory experience. You constantly feel like you don't belong, but at the same time, you're held to a higher standard than everyone else. I cannot tell you how many terrible, shit-for-brains male teammates I've played with over the years, but I bet those guys never think of their misplays as reflecting poorly on their whole gender. Women, on the other hand, especially those playing professionally, aren't allowed to be bad or mediocre without it reinforcing the stereotype that all girls are bad at games. And honestly, that's a lot of pressure when all you're trying to do is click heads. It's the same reason why I never speak in voice chat until I've actually established that I'm doing well. Because I'm afraid that if I've been doing poorly, people will be like, oh, it's because they're a girl. So we come back to the original question. Why are women bad at video games? My answer remains the same. They're not. But now that we've gone through this whole rigmarole, we actually know that it's a little more complicated than that. Don't take this out of context or anything, but it is true that on average, women perform worse than men in competitive games. That's just the way things are, that's just a fact. But it's not because of any inherent or biological difference. It's because of gender norms and structures that encourage boys to start playing games from a younger age while girls are discouraged from doing that same thing. Until later in life, when they try to enter those communities and then they still have to contend with misogyny and hostility. It's not so much that men are better at video games, it's that they're more encouraged to pursue them. And once they do, they're allowed to grow in an environment that isn't actively trying to push them out. But you know what? Things might be looking up. I know that Overwatch introduced a lot more women to the FPS genre. I myself, I really like shooters now, and I know that I never would have tried any of these games if I hadn't played Overwatch first. Plus, over in Valorant, there are a lot of amazing all-woman pro teams building the competitive scene right now, having just as much of an impact as the men, and that's incredible to see. Anyway, my pro gamer aspirations may have been dashed by the fact that I started out way too late, but I don't know, I hold out hope that somewhere out there there's a 12-year-old girl grinding Overwatch or Valorant because she saw a woman playing it and thought that could be me as well. Give it another 5 years or so. Who knows what that girl could do? Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I never really know how to end these, so here's some footage of me playing Pharah to show that I've actually grown now and I actually understand how to play Pharah now. We've come a long way, haven't we? If you like this, subscribe to my channel, I guess, and follow me on Twitter, where I post some of the same thoughts, but in text form and in under 280 characters, because videos are, turns out, just as hard as writing. Who would have thought? Oh my god! I finished it! Hopefully it's watchable.